In an attempt to skip spending 400 bucks on a set of pannier racks, I thought I'd have a go at making my own. On top of the cost of steel, I spent about 10 hours working on it, singed a couple of my fingers, and I almost set my shed up in flames. Stick around if you want to see how I made these racks. Towards the end of the video, I'll let you know the mistakes that I've made and the things that I would do differently, so if you want to have a go at making these racks, you can do a better job than I did. I bought some pre-made butt weld joints for this project because I want the end result to look really good. I have a hydraulic bender, but when I try and bend things really tight, I get a bit of a kink in the pipe, especially when it's smaller diameter stuff. So the 90-degree bends are rather inexpensive, but the T-pieces that I got to join everything up, they add up pretty quickly. So I've got some pipe, I've got the bends, I've got some flat bar, and we're in business. Then to kick things off, I measured my soft panniers so I could figure out what size hoop I wanted. If you don't have panniers to measure, or you're not already sure what size hoop you're going to go for, 350mm wide by about 250mm tall is a pretty average size for a pannier rack. Once I was happy with my hoop size, I taped it out onto my workbench and then measured diagonally from one side, or one corner, diagonally across to the other corner, and then did the other two corners. These two measurements should be pretty much bang on, and if they are, that means that your rectangle is nice and square. Now you can start marking out for your cuts. And with my taped template giving me a cutting list, I was able to cut the pipes out and prepare them for welding by beveling the edges off and just sanding back some of the mill scale from the ends of the pipes. Once I was happy that they were all cut out properly, I tacked them all together, making sure that my T-pieces were roughly in the position that I thought they needed to be in, so that the support bars that would run off them would sit in the right position. With one hoop tacked together, the welds needed to be finished off, and then we put that one aside and recreated another one for the other side. Now, these racks will need a piece of steel running from one hoop to the other hoop to spread them apart at the rear. I measured from the center of the bike out to about 10 to 15mm past the exhaust and then doubled this measurement. With the pipe cut, I used some welding magnets to hold that in place, double checked that my hoops were the same measurement all the way around, so they were nice and square with each other, or nice and parallel maybe, and then tack welded that all together. I said goodbye to the flimsy rack that came with my V-Strom, and with that off the bike it gave me 4 awesome places to start mounting this pannier rack to. Now this is where the flat bar that I mentioned earlier comes in. We are going to measure from just past the bolt points that we've now got out to just past the hoops that we've got set up on the bike and cut the flat bar to those lengths, allowing enough room for any angles that we need to make. Grab a hammer and a vise and make some measurements quickly. Bend those bits of flat bar down so when they're bolted in, they will touch onto the hoops. And with that clamped into place on the bike, we can quickly tack weld it before whipping it off, finishing off those welds. We'll do the same for all 4 of those bolt mounting holes. I gave my pipe bender a bit of a run here to make the final support bars that went from the hoops down to the pillion passenger pegs. I was originally planning to make these out of pre-made 45-degree bends, but I had a quick go with the bender and it seemed to come up alright, so I did that. Once I was happy with those, I cut up some plates which would essentially go on the end of those bars and allow for the pillion passenger pegs to bolt onto the bottom of those arms there. For all of these mounting points on the bike, I had the hoops set up where I wanted them on the bike and then clamped everything onto the mounting points that I was putting on, tack welded them on the bike, obviously with the battery disconnected, and then would take it off the bike to finish them off in the shed. Now that I've finally got everything tacked into place, I whipped the whole thing off the bike, stuck it in the shed for a final clean up of all the welds and ready for paint. Thanks for sticking around this far into the video. I hope this has given you some inspiration to maybe make your own pannier racks. Now, if you're the kind of person who's into crafting things for your own motorbike, potentially have a look at this video that I've got up here, where I go over how to make a windshield for your own motorbike. And if you own a Mighty V-Strom, I've got over 200 thumbs up that say that you might appreciate this video over here, which goes through the process of checking the valve clearances on your bike. And lastly, as promised, here are some things that I would do differently. Number one, setting out the hoop as just 4 corners and then 4 straight pieces of bar between them. Now the first hoop that I made, I cut little pieces of pipe with the T-pieces in between and welded it all together. The second hoop, I just did the 4 corners, long pieces of bar, and then once I'd welded it into a hoop, I cut out little sections for those T-pieces, and it definitely was easier to put together like that. Number 2, I found after a bit of experimentation that a 40 grit flat disc was the easiest thing to use, with a really light touch to clean up the welds and get into the corners and things like that. Number 3, in my opinion, the brackets that are welded onto the top of the hoops, they look better if they're welded to the inside top of the hoop rather than to the very top of the hoop. I did some both ways, and the inside top definitely looks better. Number 4, I made this whole thing as a single piece. It doesn't bolt together anywhere. Now, if you are considering taking it on and off a few times and things like that, you might want to make it so that it bolts together somewhere. And last of all, please make sure if you've got paper plans, don't put them anywhere near where you're welding.